It's all yours.
All right. Good morning, everyone. Thanks for joining me. For those of us who have not met, my name is Michelle Moore. I'm co-founder of My Learning Consultants and have a background in instructional design and education. I've been using Moodle now for about 17 years. That just feels really weird to say. Yeah, 17 years. Over the course of that time, for most of that time, I have been working for Moodle partners, first as another Moodle partner, and now our company is a Moodle partner as well. So I've had the opportunity to work with a lot of different organizations, whether that's corporate training programs, whether that's organizations who are training clients or end users of different sorts, and also working in different academic settings too. So a lot of different experience thinking about how Moodle works and how people teach and how they're developing their courses. Over that time, I have found that there are a number of things that people are doing that I think they feel like they need to do that are actually making their job tougher. And that's what I want to talk to you about today. Not that I'm here to try and help you make your job tougher, but help you identify those things that you might be doing that are making things more difficult than they need to be, so we can eliminate them and find other ideas. As we go through the presentation, I will be up front and tell you I'm throwing out a lot of ideas, a lot of little tidbits. So if you have questions along the way, please do interject, please ask. And then if you want more information, please follow up in the discussion forum in the course, or send me a message, or ping me on Twitter. All of those ways will work. So the first thing on the list is that I find a lot of people feel like they have to have all of the answers. So they are, they take on this role of teacher or trainer, and they feel like it's their job, right, to have all of the information and have all of the answers. And we see that come out in several different ways. One, they're producing all of the content. So and I've done this myself in the past. I spend several hours writing all of the content, developing lessons, developing videos, developing whatever it is I think my learners need, and giving it to the learners. There are other ways. There are alternatives. One, try open educational resources or Creative Commons content. There are completely open textbooks out there where you can just snag the content and do whatever you want with it. There are Moodle courses out there that you can download and adjust. Creative Commons content, videos, interactive learning objects. H5P now has a hub where you can download content and make modifications. There are a lot of resources that you can use to save yourself the time and trouble of creating everything yourself. Beyond that, I also encourage you to collaborate with colleagues. There are a lot of other people either at your organization or here at a conference, people you can connect with in lots of different ways to build the same kinds of courses, because Algebra 1 is Algebra 1. There are a lot of courses where the content is going to be very similar. Yes, you might put your own spin on it. That's cool. You still have that flexibility, but it doesn't mean you have to build everything all by yourself. Beyond that, I would also recommend that you ask your students to source and share content. And this is probably, these last two are probably my favorites, because when you ask students to find content, you see a lot of benefits. One, let's imagine that you spent a lot of time creating the perfect video for your course. That's one way of going about things. If you do that, your students may watch one video, if they watch that. If you ask them to find their own video or create their own video on the topic, then they will probably head out to the web, YouTube maybe, look for information. They'll probably look through at least 4 or 5 different videos trying to find the perfect one to share with the group, the one that resonates with them most. Maybe this kid likes the video that has the cartoons and the dancing bears, and this other one likes the really Einstein-like guy who's giving the more serious presentation. It allows every student to pick the one that works for them. You let them bring those back to the course, ask them to share, and then ask them to rate each other's videos, you know, and pick the one that they think is the best across all of the videos. So now think about this. How many more videos are they watching? How many different presentations of that same content are they going to get? How much processing, critical thinking, reflecting are they going to have to do in all of that versus, you know, you spending all the time up front to give them that information? Lots of ways you could do that. You can also let students do the teaching. And this could be either in your synchronous sessions, you know, a little content area, let them do a presentation. You could let them build lessons. You could let them build books. You could let them build H5P videos or quiz questions or other content. All of these things also require a higher level of engagement, a higher degree of application and critical thinking to get them to apply the content at a deeper level. It also, again, gives students the opportunity to hear different learners approach the same content or approach the information. So they get different perspectives. All huge advantages. I had one other thought there and I just lost it. So yeah, let students do the teaching. There can be huge wins there too. Any idea when MoodleNet will be back? Yeah, so I'd have to look. I can't remember where the MoodleNet resources are now. I do know that I can still locate them. I'll have to see if I can find those or if somebody else can find them and post that link. That would be fantastic. And then I don't know the timeline for the MoodleNet or that new MoodleNet community to come into play. I know that they at Moodle HQ are still working on that, and they're working on content repositories. I don't have a timeline, I'm afraid. I do know that there are other people in the Moodle community who have created resources. I can't name any of those at the moment off the top of my head, but there may be other places out there as well. So good question. So thinking about the benefits of these options. One, when you let the students or you look for content in other places, it lets you do what you do best. There is no reason for you to write instructions on how to do solve, let's go back to algebra, two-step equations, right? What is valuable is for you to offer your own spin on that, to provide the more personalized, detailed instruction at the level the students need it. So instead of you spending time doing stuff that's really generic, you can specialize. When you ask students to engage in the educational process, then you learn more about what they know. When they're just consuming information and asking or answering multiple choice questions, it's really hard to understand what they understand and what they don't and find those gaps. So you get a lot more insight this way. The opportunity for students to interact and share in a course also creates opportunities to build connections. And those connections, those relationships, the opportunities to collaborate are huge. Even more so right now where every student is working from home and isolated from their peers. This creates a network, so they learn to rely on themselves and others and not just you as the teacher to have all of the answers. And then these activities also give students more opportunities to learn. They get to see the content in different ways. They get to explore different resources. Again, they're not just relying on your one view and your one presentation of the information. Cool. Thanks for those links, guys. Yes, the idea of having students find videos is one of my favorites, because it really is, every student likes a different kind of video and every different viewpoint is very interesting. And I do, if you're thinking about how to do that, I will tell you that I often use the glossary for that sort of idea, because the glossary lets the students add that video. They can just embed it right there in the glossary entry, and then students can rate those and add comments, and you can categorize, and it's totally searchable. So, and then I will often do that in one glossary for the entire course, and then we have categories for different units or different topics. So it gets maximum usage. Another thing that I see a lot of educators and trainers do that makes their job more difficult is they try to answer all of the questions. They take it upon themselves to respond to everything. And I see that in everything from the introductions forum in the course to questions they ask in the question and answer forum. If they ask a question in the chat or in a live meeting, the teacher feels this responsibility to answer those questions. But there are other ways to do this too that offer some of the same advantages we've talked about already. So think about creating a space for students to ask questions and answer them. Hesitate just a little bit before you jump in and answer a question. Give the students an opportunity to answer them for each other. Because if you jump in and answer the question, you're reinforcing the idea that they need to rely on some teacher or somebody else to know the answer. And then you also deprive them of the opportunity to reflect and think and research and come up with answers together. So, you know, you have to be careful about how you do this, right? You don't want to leave them neglected and end up with like 42 posts where the students are going, hey, are you going to answer my question? But just give them a little bit of grace period. And then if students are sending you emails or messages privately and they're asking questions, then ask them, you know, hey, can I post this in the public question and answer forum so that other students can benefit and get the response? So you create a culture where the students are asking and answering questions together. You can also develop a collection of FAQs. The glossary feature offers a setting that lets you present those glossary entries as an FAQ. The frequently asked questions can be created by you, but you can also allow students to add frequently asked questions. And it again creates an opportunity for students to be resourceful and independent and empowers them with information and saves you time. Think about recording videos or ask students to record videos to cover common topics. Or let students take the lead on office hours. This one's kind of a cool idea for me too, right? Because I know that when I would teach my own online courses, I would set aside this time, I'm going to be available, I'm going to answer these questions. Probably 90% of the questions were things that were in the syllabus or in the instructions somewhere, or a point of clarification or a little bit of reassurance, just letting the learner kind of talk out loud about what it is they wanted to do. They weren't always things that only I could offer. So think about what would happen if you let the students or groups of students take the lead on office hours, and then they leave those, and if there are questions they can't answer, maybe then you address those in a live web conference session or in a follow-up response in a video or a discussion forum. Or if you're working across grade levels or levels of expertise, let the students who are in the more advanced courses answer questions for the younger students. So if students are in Algebra 2, let them answer questions for students in Algebra 1. They're getting a review of content, they're learning how to explain things, and we all know that teaching is one of the best ways to learn. So you create that opportunity for them. Do glossary entries come through in an import, backup, or store? It is user data, so it does make it tricky. So part of how I deal with the glossary entries is a matter of philosophy, right? I can export all of the glossary entries from a glossary, and I could back those up and put them in my new course and the new glossary. But for me, the exercise of creating the glossary is the learning opportunity. It's not often that I would expect learners to go back through and look at all the glossary entries created by last semester's students. It's really about that collaboration and creating the entries. So if I do need the glossary entries, if I want to bring those across, yes, you can export those, or you can remove all of the students from the course that haven't created entries. I'm not being very clear about this. It is possible to back up a course with user data. But yeah, more often than not, I just create the framework for the glossary, and we see what students create in the new course in the new semester. Because everything's contextual, right? The student might explain a term one way because of some other video that they watched or some discussion you had that is meaningful and relevant just to that group of students. So benefits, a lot of the same benefits we saw with the other ideas before. It again lets you do what you do best. You have a better understanding of what they know, more interaction, more collaboration. Think about, for instance, these students who might be answering questions for other students. Now, when they have the opportunity to work in groups or they're working together on a project, they have other people that they feel like they know. And then all of these things give students more chances to learn. Another thing that I see people do is they work on providing all of the feedback. They do it all manually and try to provide feedback to everything that the students say. Again, I see this in discussion forum posts where the teachers are responding and saying, great post, you know, I'm gonna give you a grade for this and here's what it is. Make things easier on yourself, make things more immediate for students, give them greater benefits, and give them more opportunities to hear from others. So for one, look for automated feedback options. There are a lot of ways that you can automate feedback inside of Moodle that take the load off of you. So for instance, you could do a lesson, and when you present your content in the lesson, you can ask a question. Depending on how they answer the question, you can provide feedback or kind of adaptive instruction. If they answer A, I know that they're just a little off track, so I'm going to provide this explanation on the next page. If they pick B, they're a little more lost, so I'm going to provide this explanation. If they pick C, I know they're on the right track, so we're just going to carry on. You can also offer quizzes as formative assessment and automated feedback. This is a nice replacement for worksheets, right? I see teachers still doing worksheets online. They post the worksheet as a PDF, ask students to print it or fill it in and then submit it. Most of those questions could be set up as quiz questions and automatically graded. Makes things a lot easier for you, and it provides the students with the feedback at the moment of need when they're most interested. You can do similar things with H5P. You can provide feedback built in. And I'm trying to think if I'm thinking of missing any others. Lots of different options, right? And then you can also engage students in peer review. So peer review, you can use the quintessential Moodle tool, the Moodle Workshop, which is designed for facilitating that peer review process. You can ask learners to submit their work, create a rubric or an evaluation form. It can be very simple. It can be, did they do these things? Yes, 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 no. Or it can be a full in-depth rubric, really detailed, looking at the details of the submission. The workshop activity will automate the aggregation or the collection of that feedback. And then students have the advantage of being able to see all of that feedback from all of their peers or a few of their peers. So they get multiple perspectives. And then students learn more by seeing how others approach the work, thinking critically about, did they meet the requirements? What did those requirements mean? And then they benefit from seeing, how other students approach the work that aren't just like them. So they get that perspective as well. And that peer review feature can come into play also in discussion forums, because you can use ratings there and let students give each other feedback, whether numerical or just simply qualitative. You can use ratings on glossary entries, and you can use ratings on database entries too. I've not developed any complex lessons yet, interested in learning how to set them up. So there are two resources that I would point you to. One, if you go to the Mount Orange Moodle site, it's the Mount Orange School Moodle demo site. You can log in here with various roles, including a teacher role. And there are lessons in some of these courses that you can download and tear apart and modify to make work the way you want. And then there is also a demo Moodle activities course on sandbox.moodledemo.net. Oh, that's not the one I wanted. There is a Moodle activities demo course. Actually, it might be on the Moodle School 2 site too. That has examples of all of the different activities that are available in Moodle, including several variations on the lesson. What I'll do after this session is I have a copy of that course, and I will upload that backup file to the session course. I also have several other lessons that I have backed up over time, and I will load all of those, that backup file, into the Moodle course as well. And then you can import or restore that into your own site, take a look at the settings, see how they work, try modifying things. I think that learning how to build lessons and workshops too, and even databases, this is the smart way to go. It's a lot easier than trying to navigate all of those settings from scratch and trying to decide what each of those does and how they work. Oh, I also mentioned the Learn Moodle MOOC. I think the next one of those runs in October. I think I just saw an announcement. That would be another place where you could potentially learn about how to do lessons and some of those other activities. Thank you. Hart, can you, do you have the link handy? Can you post the link to that? Cool, thank you. Love this team approach. I won't belabor these points, but we again see many of the same advantages that we, that we've seen for the other things when you outsource and give other students the opportunity to engage. So the next item here is that I see a lot of people limiting access to content, which sounds just crazy when you say it, right? Like, we're delivering courses, we want people to learn. Why in the world would we limit access to content? I see it though, and it happens in really subtle ways. The first example is that people do things to complicate consumption. So for those of you who may not be familiar with these little devices, these are cassette tapes. So we used to use these when I was younger, and a cassette tape you put into a cassette recorder. You can record your audio, and then you could give the cassette tape to somebody else and they could hear it play back, right? This is still functional, right? If I have a cassette tape and I have a cassette recorder, then I could record my lecture on the cassette tape, send out copies to all of my students, say, here you go, here's my lecture, best thing ever, everything you need to know. So technically, someone might say, well, that is totally functional. That technology works. It's just about having the right tools. Now, I don't expect that anyone is really truly sending out cassette tapes, but we are doing similar things when we post documents in PDF form, or we post documents as Word documents or PowerPoint slides. There are lots of ways that we are giving learners content in ways that are more difficult for them than they need to be. Think about the emails you get, think about the resources you get. When I get an email from my kid's school, for instance, you know, if it's got a PDF, then it doesn't get read quite as quickly as the email that is text-based, because I'm often reading those on my phone. The PDF doesn't play well there. I can't read it without finding my glasses. All of this. We're doing the same things for our students. We've got to find better ways, mixtapes, yes. We've got to find better ways to distribute content. So if you're kind of at this bottom rung and you're distributing content as PowerPoint files and Word documents, then let's at least graduate up to PDF files. Those are more universal. They'll work across devices. It doesn't matter what they're operating on. That should be okay. But those don't always work well, as I noted. If I am looking at content on a phone, PDF files are awful. So if you want to make sure that your students are accessing content and not skipping over it, think about loading your content into the LMS. So use books, lessons. H5P is pretty good too, even on mobile devices. You can use Pages. Most of the content that people are distributing in PDF files and documents can be very easily converted to a web-based format inside of one of Moodle's tools without a lot of effort, because it's mostly text with minimal formatting. Now, I'll give you a little grace. If you have PDF files that have really complex diagrams and images and all that sort of stuff, it's going to take a little more effort to convert. I realize there are also restrictions sometimes related to copyright, though I think there's some allowances there related to accessibility that may offer you some other options. So look for other ways to distribute content. When it comes to the PowerPoint presentations, find a way to embed it in a way that's easy to click. So I've been using Canva. That's what we're looking at here. I have a link to this presentation on Canva inside of the course. PowerPoint presentation equivalent, but nothing to download. It operates within the web page. It'll work on any device. SlideShare Vimeo, I'll do the same sort of thing. Canva, canva.com. I've been using it for all of my presentations for a while. I created virtual backgrounds for Zoom using it. They have templates for that. I created badges the other day with Canva. They have tools, you can create little animations. You can, it created flyers for a couple of different booth presentations or booths. Just endless. And one of the things I love about Canva, all these images, right? Normally I would have to either scour Creative Commons to try and find suitable images, or I would have to buy images. I've got a pro license, I think, with Canva that gives me access to all of these images, and I can use and reuse. There is a free version. And with the free version, I think they've changed their licensing a little bit. But when I was originally using the free version, I could choose from the free pictures to use. And if the free picture didn't work, then I could often say, oh, I like this pro image, I'm gonna pay $1 for that one. And so I'd have a presentation with a bunch of free images and a couple of pay for images and spend like $3 and save myself a ton of time. But lots of different templates, highly recommended. I used to use, what's the other one? HaikuDeck. If you're familiar with HaikuDeck, it's kind of similar, but Canva is so much more flexible. Yes, the other format for presentations. So, for students to download it. So if I load my presentation in SlideShare or in Vimeo, I do believe there are tools there that you can choose to allow the learner to download it. Canva, if I link to it this way, it doesn't have a download link. But what I often try and think about, and this is probably a point later on in the presentation, is I try thinking about how I can deliver the information or the content in a couple different formats. Because one of the things I'm hyper aware of right now are the students that don't have reliable internet connections. So Canva is really cool if people have access to the internet. But if I have students who are relying on the internet connection at McDonald's, like the drive to McDonald's every time they want to get online, or their school parking lot, I don't want to have to force them to do that when I can give them this same presentation in a different format. So I'll often load it in this format, so it's easy to access, but then I'll also load it in a PDF format, so that if students are using the mobile app or they're downloading content ahead of time or to refer back to, then they can get it that way too. Unsplash, oh, cool. I'm gonna have to make note of that one. Thank you. So the next thing that I see people doing that complicates consumption is they are taking extreme measures to make things fun. And fun usually includes lots of colors, lots of different formatting. I also see people doing this to highlight what's important. So everything ends up in a color, everything ends up in bold. And all of these colors, all of these things that people are doing actually make it harder for your learners to get to what it is that you're trying to teach. So think about this. If this lady were trying to give a presentation to me, I would probably find it really difficult to focus, because her bangles would be rattling, and all this color and all this movement just makes it really hard to focus on her. We're doing the same things to our students in our courses when we try to incorporate all of these elements. So instead, use heading styles to organize and add emphasis. Be careful about trying to manually adjust font sizes to make things look exactly the way you want. Heading styles provide meaning, they increase accessibility, they work more consistently across devices. If you don't like the way a heading style looks, talk to your theme designer or someone who can modify your theme so that heading styles appear in different ways. Keep your formatting simple. So instead of all the different colors and the highlighted text of, blocks of text, aim for consistency, and then use bold and italics sparingly to communicate things that are important. Make it easy. When everything is important, nothing is. And so be careful with that. Build beauty into the theme. So instead of trying to make everything beautiful and lay things out and control the color and the style inside of your course and replicating that in every course, then work with your theme developer, find a theme that lets you modify that in the theme so that it's consistent across courses, so that things work the way you want to work, and you're spending time on the content and the interaction in the course rather than on the look and feel. And then strive for consistency. Pick a font style and size and just use it. You know, what are you going to use for headings? What are you going to use for labels? And then I duplicate the heck out of things so that I am consistent from one thing to another. These things both allow you to do what you do best, because it's more important for you to be developing content and awesome learning activities than trying to be a web designer. And it ensures access, because again, all of those things interfere with accessibility and universal design. Oh yes, and sharing cart can be used for duplicating. And I often duplicate things within a course and across courses. And Moodle 3.9, by the way, has a new feature for copying courses. So when I'm trying to just copy one course to another, you know, from one semester to the next, or create an exact copy of a course, that process has gotten easier. I'll admit I haven't used it yet, but I've heard good things. We've talked about this idea a little bit already, but the other thing I see people doing is they're delivering content in a way that makes it accessible in an online only format. So you do have to be careful. If you are loading videos and you have them loaded on YouTube, but you want to make the course available offline, those YouTube videos may not be accessible. So be careful about that. YouTube is a great choice, or some sort of streaming media platform is a good choice, because you aren't reliant on the learner's internet connection to try and download that full file. But in some cases, learners need that option too. So don't make everything absolutely available only online. Plan for alternatives. So instead, make sure offline access is available. Encourage students to use the mobile app and/or the desktop app so they can have offline access to content. They're not beholden to that internet connection. And then offer content in multiple formats so that they can get the information regardless. You know, stop trying to complicate that consumption, right? And it's all about ensuring access. We want students to have access to the information. That's the whole point. And this one's going to feel a little ironic since I am doing all of the talking here, but I see a lot of people doing all of the talking in their online courses. So if I think about their live sessions, for instance, they lecture, yeah, irony is not dead. So they go into a live meeting session and they spend the whole time talking at the students. I've probably said this before, but if you do a live session and your students can watch the recording and get the same outcome, you're doing it wrong. You really need to be thinking about alternatives. Yeah, we don't want to do lecture, lecture, lecture. So instead, think about recording your lectures instead. So there is no reason for your students to come, set aside a time, try to find an internet connection to listen to you talk. Record the lecture, put it in H5P. You can actually add some interactivity, help make sure that students are getting what they need to get, that they understand the information. Present the content in alternative formats. So instead of a video lecture, make sure you're providing the transcript. Think about taking that same information and putting it in a book or a lesson. And then go back to that idea of allowing learners to source the content rather than you spending the time lecturing. The advantages here, you get, again, another opportunity to do what you do best. You give the students more chances to learn. Because if you're delivering that lecture live in a live meeting, if they miss something you've said, it's tricky for them. They can't rewind you in the moment, right? If you record it and you put that in the course, they can rewind and watch as many times as they'd like. And that recording is likely going to be filtered a little bit more than the presentation that you do live. So they can really zero in on those key concepts. Loom yesterday. Yeah, I heard somebody else talking about that. And I know Dan was presenting on that, which says it all, because he always knows all the coolest tools. I'm definitely gonna have to check that out. Oh, cool. And I like Camtasia. Screencastify. So there are some settings, Whitney, regarding enabling offline access. there are some settings on particular activities, quizzes, for instance. You can decide whether or not that quiz is available offline, meaning can they download it and take that quiz on their phone or on the desktop app. I also just double check settings at the site level and see if there's anything that I need to enable to make sure my content is available offline. I believe at this point, all of those settings are enabled by default, that you don't have to take any extra steps at the site level, but there are sometimes choices at the activity level that allow you to decide whether or not the content's going to be available offline. The other thing is, I think, if I remember correctly, and Ted, maybe you can help me out here, the mobile app, if you are hosting your Moodle site with a Moodle partner, the offline access is included in the mobile app. But if you're doing your own, then it might not. If somebody can check that and confirm that for me, I did.
Yeah, we'll double check.
Okay.
So Michelle, does that mean that the kids, or anyone for that matter, they download the info when they're at the location, it's on their device, they go wherever, they can still complete it, and then somehow later it uploads on its own?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, that's exactly it.
Thank
yeah.
you.
Jeff is the guy that would know about this. The limited access. So it's limited access if you are not hosting with a Moodle partner. Is that right, Jeff? Oh, thank you, Jeff, for the clarification. So Whitney, to answer your question, so the students would need, while they're connected, to initiate that sync. So let's say they go to the school parking lot, they want to download the course or the week's activities, they would need to initiate the sync, because otherwise, if it's always pulling out that data, they're going to take up a lot of space on their phone. So they initiate the sync, say, I want to pull down the course, and then they can go away, complete it offline, and then when they're online again, it'll upload. Can't do if timed. Can't do a quiz offline if it's timed. Right. So you do have to think about some of those things. Cool. Lots of feedback coming in here. Scott, that's curious to me. I haven't, I'll have to check that. Cool. Okay. Good discussion. So let's talk about delivering information, alternatives here too. So I see a lot of times where people are doing these live web conference sessions, these live class meetings, and they're spending that time posting or providing information, providing announcements. Just a reminder, this week you need to do, and remember next week our class meeting is going to be on Thursday, and all of this information that could be very easily posted online. The announcements forum is built for this purpose. If you need to communicate important information, post it there. This also helps your students if they, goodness, we're all working in strange settings these days. If their kid happens to come up at that exact moment while you've said, remember that quiz has been postponed, they'll completely miss that information. So put the information in writing, post it in the LMS, and make it available and accessible to them that way. In the live meetings, plan for interaction. Think about, as you're playing in the meeting, what is it your students are going to do? That is the key. In every minute, what are your students doing? And then use that live meeting time to do the things you can't do asynchronously. I want to make sure we have time to get through the rest of these things. Going to skip forward a little bit. So the next thing that I see a lot of educators and trainers do is they feel compelled to grade everything. Every element of the course gets graded by hand. They touch every item. So I'll reinforce here, think about developing activities that offer that immediate automatic feedback so that you're not having to do the work. And again, think about allowing learners to give each other feedback. Lots of ways that you can do that. So much time during COVID. Giving the feedback, you mean? Grading, yes. Yeah, and during COVID, I mean, we're in like the most unfortunate situation possible, right? Like you're trying to figure out how to move online quickly. And even though we know all these best practices, it takes time to do all of those things to set up these structures. I am fortunate to have not been in a classroom in that position when this all came down, but you know, I taught middle school math for a number of years, and I was trying to imagine like what I would have done in that case, you know. And my philosophy then wasn't quite as evolved as, you know, in thinking about letting students do the work, but I'd like to think that I would have asked the students to contribute, and we would have taken a team approach. But yeah, don't feel compelled to grade every submission. Try grading holistically instead. Think about this for discussion forums. Instead of asking students to post in every forum every week throughout the course, think about that holistic interaction. You don't expect students to have something to say every day in a live classroom. Don't put that on them in the online course either. Sometimes you just, you know, you want to reply, you may not have something original, or some days you may have something original but nothing to follow up. I think that should be okay. Give people the opportunity to have authentic conversations rather than forcing them to write these mini essays that often appear in discussion forums. And then think about developing activities purely for learning. If you were in my session yesterday, we talked about the idea of creating quizzes and creating a little competition. And there are lots of ways that you can engage students in learning without making it for a grade. I find, again, competition is a great way to make that happen. And then this last point gets to some of the things we were talking about earlier, right? The problem of trying to build everything from scratch, trying to build efficiently. So one thing that people do that makes things a lot tougher than it needs to be is they start every time, every course from a blank slate. I will tell you, you know, I was never one to use the exact same lesson plans from year to year, but I didn't start from a blank slate each time. So think about the last course that you built that you really liked or that you liked most of. Duplicate that course, back up and restore it, and start from that. Think about building your own course template. So if you know in every course, I always put an announcements form, I always say this, I always put a question and answer form, and I always say this, I always put a glossary, you put in that information, and then every course you build, you just use those same elements. Do the same thing for the blocks, do the same things for your topic headings and labels, and then add in the content that's unique or specific. Even better yet, work within your institution, your organization, to build institutional, organizational templates. These templates are not intended, or at least my viewpoint is, we're not trying to lock people into a structure, but we're trying to make things easier. Let them do what they do best. Maybe you need a different template for science than you need for English. That's okay. Maybe different schools, different departments need slightly different templates, but make things easier on your students by helping them have a familiar interface to interact with. I was talking with Gavin Henrik the other day about interface design, and he was showing me how he had worked with a client, and they looked at like 4 different courses and said, okay, if a student needed to complete an assignment and submit it, where would they go? If a student had a question, where would they go? In every single one of those courses, the answer was different. So I realized that in a face-to-face environment, students adapt to these things, right? The pencil sharpener is on this wall in this classroom, it's on this wall in the other. But the advantage of a face-to-face classroom is you have a room full of people you can ask. The teacher is always there at the moment you need to ask them. Students don't have that benefit in the online course, and they shouldn't have to watch a 30-minute tutorial for every course to figure out how to navigate it. So develop some consistency, think about how you can make things easier for you, eliminate the number of things you have to think about, and make things easier for your students. Sorry, a couple of questions popping up here. So what do you what do you do when students get frustrated when things aren't graded? They consider them not count. Yep. Yeah, that is a tricky problem. I think some of it is developing a culture, right? And I think there's a lot of work systemically as a society to try and address that, and you may not overcome it in your own course. But I think that you can be a little sneaky in these things, right? So if again, we think about, and it's going to be just one example, but create opportunities for competition. You will suck a lot of students in this way. So if you have things that you know are important or vocabulary that's coming up and you just wanted to create a quiz and you could challenge students to, to take this quiz and see where they appear on the leaderboard. That's one way to do that. You can challenge students, you know, who's the first one who can find the best video on this topic, and you're going to get a badge. You can use progress bars. Progress bars can be a subtle motivator for students. You may still have students who say, I don't care about a progress bar, I'm not going to do that. But all of these things, the gamification of your course can help with that without you saying explicitly like these things count and these things don't. And I think it also depends on how you set up your structure of your course as a whole. A lesson in my course, which is what I use to deliver my content, isn't going to count. It's the information. The activities that they do rely on the information in the lesson, and then those are the things that count. So if you kind of use that as a structure, then students come to know, like, here's how this sort of stuff works together. Yeah, and if you use, motivates, structure, that's true too. You can lock things down. I'm a little hesitant to do that, but it does work for some people to do that too. So other people build every element of the course. Instead of building every element, duplicate the existing activities. In many of my courses, I will use labels for the sections of the course or of a topic. You know, this is where you learn and this is where you apply. So I have two labels, learn and apply. So I just duplicate those over and over if I haven't built them into my template. Import your own activities or use the sharing cart to bring your own activities from other courses, or borrow activities that were developed by others. Don't reinvent the wheel. Do what you do best. And don't feel the need to individualize all feedback, at least not manually. Create rubrics. Rubrics allow you to be consistent, allows the feedback to be consistent, allows you to show progress for a learner if you're using the same rubric on multiple activities. You can find rubrics over at Ruby Star for Teachers. Participation can be graded. Yep. You can also do like awarding badges from participants to other participants for certain levels of engagement, or you can award that too. But yeah, Ruby Star for Teachers, I like for creating rubrics. You can develop your own. On assignments, I also like to create collections of common feedback phrases, because time and time again, I will say, you forgot a comma here. So use your comments, those common phrases, to hit the big ideas so that you don't have to type them again and again. Thank you, Ted. And grading guides are awesome. Yes, they're a nice middle ground between rubrics and grading things yourself. Thank you, Hart. Appreciate that one. And then I'm going to sneak one last one in here because I've seen this one come up, especially in this setting we're in now, where everyone's forced to move everything online, and we're used to delivering quizzes online or quizzes in the classroom where we can watch every student and assure to some degree that they're not cheating. So I hear a lot of people say, you know, we're worried about cheating. How are we going to prevent that? What are we going to do? First, I think you have to resign yourself to the fact that you cannot prevent it entirely, and that there was, I'm afraid to say, probably more cheating going on in your classes than you knew even to begin with. But a few things that you can do to reduce the odds of cheating or make it more difficult would be randomizing questions on your quizzes, create larger question banks, let students contribute questions if you need help creating a larger question bank, shuffle your questions and answers, set time limits, check your quiz review settings, make sure you're not giving away the answers if you have other students taking the quiz later. Reduce the weight of exams in the overall course grade, maybe rely a little bit more on projects or other tasks that can do a nice job of reflecting understanding. And then there are also a number of proctoring tools out there. I know, is it Urkund was one of the sponsors, and I think that was one of the, no, they do a plagiarism tool. But yeah, I feel like there was a presentation on proctoring tools, but there are quite a lot of them out there. They run at a variety of price points and level of, the level of monitoring or proctoring that they do. Man, Hart, I'm gonna bring you to like every presentation with me. This is great. So if you have questions, and I'm gonna back up here just a bit and hit the questions, but if you have questions and you're not able to get it in here, please send me an email, catch me on Twitter, visit our website. I am happy to help you implement these things. We do this kind of work with a lot of our clients where we say, okay, we're trying to develop templates, we're trying to develop online courses, we're trying to meet these needs. And that's like my favorite part of the job. So I'd be happy to work with you if that's something of interest. If you have a question about something in particular that I've talked about in the presentation and how you might do that, please do send me an email. Know that I'm not gonna just send you a bill in response to that. I am interested in helping you out. Okay, a lot of questions coming in. What would you recommend? Oh, would you recommend participation as a grade category? You could, yeah, definitely. Definitely. I know I talked to someone there at Carroll College once about they made students responsible for marking participation grades for other students. So they would pair students. So like if Ted and I were paired up, then it would be my job to mark Ted's participation grade and Ted's job to mark my participation grade. Meaning it's not the teacher's responsibility to evaluate and keep track of every student, but you do have someone kind of monitoring, and you could use that at a non-graded activity. You know, we're just going to give you feedback and dude, you've been kind of quiet. Can you say something more? Here's how you might change your forum posts to get more feedback. Or you could make it a graded item. You could make it a workshop item. You could define what good participation looks like and turn it into a workshop activity. I feel there's a shift. While it's important to know the content, I would like to highlight that one and bold it and turn it green. It is more important on how to find answers. So this is something I think about quite a lot in my courses, is that even if students don't get all of the information because I've separated out the content and asked them to teach one area, it's probably not so bad that they may not become the expert in this other area. It's more valuable to them that they know how to find the answers. Oh, yes, and be careful what you wish for. I don't know if the be careful what you, oh, if you're with me in every presentation.
Yeah. Coming to
Yes.
your presentations, yeah.
Yes. Thanks, Wes.
Michelle, what while you're reviewing, somebody
Yes.
asked me directly if we could save the chat and link a lot of the resources that other folks mentioned in the chat and during the presentation, and put them somewhere where the attendees for this presentation could access that.
Yes. So what I'll do is I'll create a glossary, because I find glossaries are great places for resource collections. So I'll create a glossary, and then Ted, maybe you and I can tackle putting the links that were noted in the chat in that glossary as entries. But if you have other things, other resources, other discussion forums that you know that talk about some of these same things, Moodle documentation, add them to the glossary, and we will enable ratings so you can like the ones you like, and we'll enable comments. So if you've used, say, Respondus, you can comment and say, here's what's great and here's what's not. And yes, I may be addicted to the glossary. It's a problem. I haven't found a glossaries anonymous yet though, so it may be a problem for a while. Oh, curious about why you don't like to restrict access. So I'm just generally hesitant about locking down a course to restrict access to other activities, because what I find is that putting those restrictions in place often causes more problems for the students or as many problems for the students who are there to do what it is they want to do, than affecting the change that you're trying to affect. Because imagine, let's say I, and an exceptional student, I go into the course, I have background information in this content that you're teaching. I know like 90% of it, but you're gonna make me watch this video all the way through, or you are going to make me click through every page of the lesson to get to the actual activities. I don't like restricting a student and measuring their ability to complete the course by their ability to jump through hoops. I'm more interested in defining activities that really allow a student to demonstrate their knowledge and demonstrate their skills. If you look at the student who's operating on the other end of the spectrum, they really need the information, but they're frustrated and annoyed and aren't going to jump through your hoops no matter what. They'll play the video, they'll walk away and go play their PlayStation, or they'll, do the clicks and not read a thing. So me putting that restriction doesn't necessarily mean the students are going to get what they need to get anyway, but it does potentially make things harder for the students who really want the information and are invested and engaged. And yes, because it's a barrier, thanks, Hart. The glossary does end up in every section. It makes sense to do it where there is a pedagogical need, review feedback before making a final submission. That I could be on board with, right? Like, I want you to get your feedback from your peers before you go on to this, or yeah. So, but yeah, I just think about all the bureaucratic processes that you've been through, whether it's completing your driver's license or getting there's been a lot of talk lately about buying in the car and you have to get your VIN inspected, and like people making things as complicated as they can be, and the people that are doing the right thing and in the right, it just makes it harder for them than really preventing the problem that we're trying to solve. These are great questions. Other questions, other ideas to share?
That's it. Just to let you know, if you would, please go back to the course to either continue the conversation, but definitely go back to check out the glossary that we're going to add to it yourselves. And then please go back to the Mountain Moot session evaluation activity for this presentation and give Michelle feedback, please.
Thank you so much, everyone, and enjoy the last day of the conference. I'll stick around for a bit in case you still have questions. Hey, Dave. It's good to see familiar names.
No.
Hey, Michelle, this is Wes. I have a question.
Hey, Wes.
Our school does not have